The rain came sideways down a two-lane road in Rowan County that November afternoon, silver against the ditches and the last stubborn leaves. Nothing moved on the shoulder but water. Behind a leaning sign that read Larkspur Nursery in cream and faded green, two greenhouses hunched into the granite. One was patched with cloudy plastic. The other still remembered what heat was. A wooden bridge ran across a dry creek bed on the far side of the propagation shed, tilted 3 degrees from decades of settling. Nothing had been painted in 7 years. Nothing had been thrown away in longer. 68 miles south, inside a treatment center, where 3-hour machines cleaned 3-hour blood, a phone screen glowed with a photograph. Two brown suitcases stood zippered and upright by a front door. Beside them, a message in a daughter's flat corporate hand: "I packed everything you'll need." The woman in the recliner did not answer. She turned her phone face down on the blanket, and beneath the cardigan, the tubes kept doing their work. $6 was what the ceramic dog had cost 43 years ago. $6 was also what a stranger had tucked behind a panel her father had built for whoever finally came looking. The panel had waited in the wall since 1982. The daughter with the suitcases did not know it was there. Neither did the man in the good coat who had drafted the offer. Neither did the 68-year-old woman on the machine yet. She was about to find out. The rain came sideways down Sable Ridge Road that November afternoon, silver against the ditches and the last stubborn leaves. Behind a leaning sign that read Larkspur Nursery in cream and faded green, two greenhouses hunched into the granite shoulder like animals bracing for weather. Nothing had been painted in 7 years. Nothing had been thrown away in longer. 68 miles south of that sign, inside a treatment center, where 3-hour machines cleaned 3-hour blood, a phone screen glowed with a photograph. Two brown suitcases stood zippered and upright by a front door. Beside them, a woman's handwriting: "I packed everything you'll need." The woman in the recliner did not answer. She turned her phone face down on the blanket, and beneath the cardigan, the tubes kept doing their work. $6 was what the ceramic dog had cost 43 years ago. $6 was also what a stranger had tucked behind a panel her father had built for whoever finally came looking. She didn't get the house. She didn't get the guest room. She didn't get the courtesy of a conversation. She got a photograph. Two brown suitcases standing zippered by Corinne's front door, and beneath them, a message in her daughter's flat corporate hand: "I packed everything you'll need." Ottilie Rensmark was 68 years old that Tuesday. She had end-stage kidney disease and a faded blue cardigan pulled over her left arm to hide the access site. Her hair, silver-streaked auburn, was pinned in a low knot she had worn since 1978 because Thorne had once said it made her look like a woman who could not be hurried. Thorne had been dead 6 years. The knot had outlived him. "Larkspur Hollow says you can move in this afternoon." That was the second line of the message. Ottilie read it twice and then read the first line again because sometimes the second reading was a different sentence. "It's close to dialysis and they have staff at night. Whitfield is bringing his things over Sunday, so this really is best for everybody." A third message appeared before Ottilie could finish reading the second. "Please don't make me feel terrible about this." She stared at those words until the screen dimmed and then went dark. Across the treatment room, a chef on morning television was folding butter into a stainless steel bowl with a wooden spoon. Somebody's machine chimed. Somebody laughed at something Ottilie had missed. The cardigan had slipped again. She pulled it back over the tubing without looking down. Two suitcases. Corinne had a good eye for luggage. The smaller suitcase was the one Ottilie and Thorne had bought in Savannah on their 10th anniversary, the one with the scuff on the corner from the porter at the airport. The larger was Corinne's own, purchased for a business trip to Phoenix in 2019 that she had complained about for 6 months afterward. Two suitcases. That was what a life reduced to when the woman doing the reducing had used a vacation day. $6, Ottilie thought. She had watched Thorne pay $6 for the ugly ceramic dog at a roadside stand outside Waynesville in 1982. Its eyes had pointed in slightly different directions even then. He had brought it home and set it on the mantel and told her it looked like a dog that had opinions about the neighbors. She had never liked it. She had kept it 43 years. Now Corinne had packed it, or Corinne had not packed it. Ottilie did not yet know which. A voice called from the next recliner. "You all right over there?" Verli Ashton had been coming to the center longer than Ottilie and had used seniority as permission to comment on everybody's cracker socks, transportation reading material, and choice of children. Today Verli wore a purple head wrap knotted at the temple, fuzzy socks patterned with tiny martini glasses, and the sort of expression a woman develops when she has spent 28 years behind a hotel front desk telling grown men their reservations do not exist. "Living the dream," Ottilie said without looking over. "That dream needs better snacks." "Every dream does." Verli turned a page of her magazine. She did not press. That was one of the reasons Ottilie liked her. Verli asked things exactly once and then let the answer arrive when it wanted to arrive. Delma, the day nurse, came over to check the lines. She was in her mid-30s and had a soft voice that never softened the content. She noticed the phone face down on the blanket and the way Ottilie's jaw had set. "Any dizziness?" "Not yet." "Nausea?" "No." Sudden urge to escape through the ceiling. Ottilie looked up at her. Delma shrugged. "You had a look." "My daughter packed my bags." The sentence surprised Ottilie more than it seemed to surprise Delma. Delma's fingers paused on the tubing. She did not say, "Oh, honey." She did not say, "I'm sure she means well." Ottilie loved her fiercely for the next 3 seconds. "Does your ride know where you're going after treatment?" "My ride appears to know more about it than I do." Delma pulled the rolling stool closer. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" Safe was a flat word. A hospital hallway was safe. A locked closet was safe. Corinne's guest room had been safe right up until Corinne decided the room belonged to Whitfield's desk. "Yes," Ottilie said. Delma waited. "I do." That answer was only half true when she said it. It became truer as it sat in the air. The phone began to vibrate. This time Corinne was calling. Ottilie watched her daughter's name fill the screen above a photograph from Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. Corinne's dark hair pinned up her mouth open in a laugh, one hand resting on Ottilie's shoulder. Whitfield had taken that photograph after dinner while Ottilie was wrapping leftovers, and Corinne was drinking the wine he had brought. Ottilie had not known then that a man who brought wine could also bring a moving truck. She answered, "Hello." "Okay." Corinne sounded breathless the way she sounded when she had rehearsed a sentence and it had not survived contact with her mother's voice. "You saw the messages." "I saw my luggage." "Mom, I wanted to tell you in person, but every time I try to bring up the future, you shut down." The future arrived with zippers. A long breath at the other end. Ottilie could hear the little sounds of Corinne's office, a copier warming, a colleague laughing in a hallway. Corinne worked in corporate insurance where unpleasant nouns went to be softened before burial. "I need you to listen." For 18 months, Ottilie had listened. She had listened from Corinne's kitchen while stirring soup, loading the dishwasher, balancing the gas bill, and pretending not to notice when Whitfield stayed 3 nights instead of one. She had listened to Corinne complain about office politics, mortgage rates, her first husband, the neighbor's barking dog, and the peculiar selfishness of people who left wet towels on the bathroom floor. She had listened so well that Corinne had stopped noticing the labor involved. "I'm attached to a machine," Ottilie said. "You have my complete attention." Corinne lowered her voice. "Whitfield's lease is up. You know that." "I know it now. We talked about him moving in. You and Whitfield talked about it." "This is my house, Mom." There it was, not shouted, not sharpened. Corinne said it the way she said water runs downhill. His monthly transfer had covered the utilities, the groceries, the property tax, the escrow, and slightly more than half the mortgage since March of 2024. The down payment had included $38,000 from the sale of the small house Ottilie and Thorne had owned. They had never called that money rent because rent would have required both of them to admit Ottilie lived there. "Yes," Ottilie said, "it is. Larkspur Hollow is nice. I toured it. They handle meals transportation emergencies. You won't have to keep pretending you're fine when you're not. Audley looked toward the rain-streaked window. Delma had drifted back to the station and was politely not looking. Verley had turned another magazine page. What time did you pack? What? My bags. Did you do it before work? I took the morning off. You used a vacation day to evict me. I am not evicting you. What do you call it? A pause. A transition. Despite herself, Audley almost laughed. Somewhere in the corporate insurance world, there was probably a folder labeled Difficult Transitions, and Corinne had read every page of it. What happens if I don't like Larkspur Hollow? You haven't seen the room. I'm not asking about the room. I'm asking what happens. A longer silence. The kind that meant Corinne had not scripted this part. We can talk after you're settled. Settled, as if Audley were dust in a snow globe. Did you pack the green tin from my dresser? I packed what you need. That wasn't my question. I don't know, Mom. I had to make decisions. Yes, I see that. She ended the call before Corinne could rearrange the sentence into a shape Audley was expected to thank her for. The receiver in her hand felt improbably heavy. She placed the phone face down on the blanket for the third time that hour and looked at the ceiling tiles. There were 42 of them in the treatment room. She had counted twice on a bad afternoon in September. 2 hours later, Delma pressed gauze to her arm and told her to stand slowly. Audley stood slowly. The floor tilted anyway, then decided to hold. Verley was already stepping into red rubber clogs. Need me to bite anyone? Not today. Offer stands until 5. In the lobby, Audley sat beneath a bulletin board advertising low-sodium cooking classes and chair yoga. Her transport driver came through the sliding doors wearing a navy rain jacket and carrying a clipboard he never seemed to write on. He was 60 thin and had the mustache of a man who had settled several arguments with dispatch by outlasting them. Larkspur Hollow. Audley looked up. No. He stopped. Dispatch has Larkspur Hollow. I'm changing the address. He shifted his weight. Is this going to make somebody call and holler at me? Almost certainly. I appreciate honesty. She gave him the address on Sable Ridge Road. He tilted his head, searching his memory. Out past the granite quarry. The place with the faded yellow sign. That's the one. You buying a tree. I'm hoping to avoid becoming one. He barked one laugh, opened the van door, and offered her his elbow because his hands were full. His name was Booker. Audley had ridden with him twice. He drove the way he spoke, without apology and without much decoration. The van smelled of vinyl and peppermint gum and rain-damp coats. Audley sat behind Booker and watched the town go by in blurred pieces. The pharmacy, the diner Thorne had disliked because they served sweet tea in mason jars. The bank where Corinne's name still lived on Audley's emergency access card. At the light near Corinne's neighborhood, Booker's turn signal ticked out of habit. Straight, Audley said. Straight it is. Her hands were trembling. She folded them together beneath the blanket. She could still change her mind. She could call Corinne, agree to inspect the room, spend one night at Larkspur Hollow. Corinne would arrive with apologies disguised as instructions. She would unpack the 2 suitcases and set Audley's medications in a plastic organizer. Whitfield would bring flowers bought near the register at the grocery store. Everybody would speak carefully until Audley's anger looked unreasonable. The light turned green. Booker drove straight. The houses thinned past the bypass. Rain lay silver in the drainage ditches. Sable Ridge Road appeared between a tire shop and a boarded-up feed store, narrower than Audley remembered, crowded at the edges with sumac. She had not visited the nursery in 9 months. That fact embarrassed her more than she expected. The old sign leaned toward the road. Larkspur Nursery in cream with a painted green larkspur nearly peeled away. Behind it, rows of shrubs and black pots, branches bare and shining. 2 greenhouses sat farther back. Alpha was the big one, 60 feet by 24 feet, with a corner patched in cloudy plastic. Beta was smaller, glass paneled, and looked as though it still remembered what heat was. The retail building wore the same cream paint her father had chosen when she was 15. It had not looked fresh then. Booker pulled up beside the locked office. You sure they're open? They're never entirely closed. That sounds either comforting or illegal. Audley reached for the door handle, but Booker was already coming around. When she stepped down, weakness washed through her legs so abruptly she caught his sleeve. He did not make a fuss. He simply stood there until she released him. You got somebody coming. I will. She took out her phone and called the number she had memorized 22 years ago when Silas Wenmore had first started working for her father. The call went to voicemail. She could hear a phone ringing faintly inside the retail building unanswered. She tried again. Somewhere out past the greenhouses, a machine stopped. The side door of Alpha opened. Silas Wenmore stepped out with a wrench in his hand. He was 71. His gray beard was shorter than she remembered, and his gray work shirt was darkened down one side, where water had run off a bench and onto him. He squinted through the rain toward her, then began walking fast. He had grown solid where he had once been thin. His hair was completely gray now. He looked at Booker, then at the blanket around Audley's shoulders and the bandage on her arm. Then he looked behind her for luggage she did not have. What happened? Audley lifted her chin toward the seasonal studio behind Beta. Does the shower still take 10 minutes to get warm? 12, and the roof leaks near the window if the rain blows east. It's blowing west so far. Booker glanced between them. I'm going to assume this counts as somebody coming. Silas ignored him. His eyes stayed on Audley's face. He did not touch her, which was almost enough to undo her. Your father's desk is covered in invoices. I don't need the desk. The studio hasn't been cleaned. I didn't ask if it was clean. A corner of Silas's mouth moved. Not a smile. Something older than a smile. He unclipped the ring of keys from his belt. Behind them, tires hissed on the wet road. A silver SUV turned beneath the leaning sign and came up the drive too fast. Corinne stopped beside Booker's van and left her door open to the rain. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then Corinne got out and her face changed as she understood that the address on the transport app had not been a mistake. You cannot stay here. Silas looked at Audley. Audley looked at the two suitcases visible in the back of the SUV. Set them by the office. Corinne stared at her mother as though Audley had spoken a language Corinne was supposed to understand, but had chosen at the last minute not to. Set them where? By the office. It's raining. Then under the awning. Mom, you're not listening. You cannot live at a garden center. Nursery, Silas said. Damn. First correction from the silent man, and it wasn't even the sharpest thing he'd say that day. Let that sit for a moment. A woman had ridden 32 miles through November rain in an insurance-approved medical van, changed her destination at a stoplight, and stepped out to be told in front of her father's partner and a driver named Booker that she could not live at a garden center. Silas said one word, and the word was nursery, and that word had been correcting Corinne's family since Corinne's mother was in the 3rd grade. Corinne turned on him. Excuse me. A garden center sells patio cushions and wind chimes. This is a nursery. I'm clarifying, Silas said. Corinne shut her car door hard enough to rock the vehicle. She had come straight from work. Her gray trousers were creased at the knee, her black blouse still tucked in, and an employee badge dangled from a blue cord around her neck. Audley had seen that badge resting on the kitchen counter every night for 3 years. She had wiped spaghetti sauce off it, untangled it from Corinne's purse strap, once driven 12 miles to bring it after Corinne left it at home. Now even the photograph on the badge looked like it belonged to a woman who handled claims efficiently. Larkspur Hollow is expecting you. They'll be disappointed. I paid a deposit. With whose money? Corinne's expression flickered. Mine. Then perhaps you can live there. Booker made a sound that might have been a cough. He opened the driver's side door. I'm heading out. Miss Rensmark, you have the dispatch number. She's not staying, Corinne told him. Booker looked at Audley. You have the dispatch number. He repeated it flat, then climbed inside. The van backed down the drive. Its red taillights disappeared past the leaning sign and left Audley with no easy way to undo what she had done. Corinne watched the van go. Unbelievable. What part? You let a medical driver abandon you here. I changed my destination. Adults are allowed to do that. Adults who can stand up by themselves, maybe. Silas's head turned slightly. Ottilie wished he had not heard. She tightened the blanket around her shoulders. Bring the suitcases. No. Then leave them. I'll get them tomorrow. How are the hydrangeas going to drive you? Hydrangeas are terrible with directions, Silas said. Corinne glared at him. Could you give us a minute? No, Ottilie said. It's his nursery, too. The word landed badly. Legally, the land and buildings were Ottilie's. Everybody standing there knew it, but Silas had opened the gates, repaired the pumps, unloaded the trucks, soothed the customers, and coaxed one more season out of the place, while Ottilie signed tax forms and avoided Sable Ridge Road. Calling it his had been easy from a distance. Saying it in front of Corinne felt like a confession. Corinne folded her arms. Fine. Does he know what happens if your blood pressure drops tonight? Does he know your diet, your medications? What if you fall? Then we'll plant her shallow so she can get out, Silas said. Ottilie looked at him. What she gets mean when she's scared. So do you. Corinne's face flushed. I'm not scared, I'm being realistic. Silas jingled the keys once. Studio's got a phone, bathroom, heat, emergency exit. I've got a spare blood pressure cuff in the office from when your grandfather refused to admit headaches meant something. My house is 6 minutes down the road. You expect me to leave my mother in a filthy room behind a greenhouse? I expect you to stop speaking about her like she's already left. That landed. Corinne looked away first. Rain tapped the metal awning above the office door in an uneven pattern that made Ottilie's teeth ache. Her legs felt hollow. The bandage over her access site had begun to itch. She wanted to sit down. She refused to do it until Corinne stopped studying her body for evidence. Larkspur Hollow has nurses at night, Corinne said quieter. Then it sounds well suited to people who choose to live there. You collapsed in the laundry room 8 months ago. You were unconscious. I was dehydrated. I thought you were dead. The bluntness silenced all three of them for a beat. Ottilie remembered waking on the cool tile floor with Corinne's knees on either side of her, one palm against Ottilie's cheek, the other fumbling with a phone. Corinne had been making a sound Ottilie had never heard before. Not crying. Something older than crying. At the hospital, Corinne had become brisk again. She made lists, she labeled drawers, she bought a shower chair without asking, and threw away a jar of salted peanuts as if punishing it. Ottilie let the memory pass through her. You were frightened. That did not give you permission to pack my bedroom. I tried talking. You suggested. You hinted. You left brochures under the mail. You never asked me what I wanted because you knew the answer. I knew you'd say no to anything that made sense. Exactly. Corinne pressed her lips together. For a moment, she looked like she was 25 again, calling from a gas station after realizing her first marriage was over. Ottilie had driven 4 hours through sleet then and spent the next 6 months making decisions so Corinne would not have to. At the time, Ottilie had called that love. She was not sure now what to call it. Corinne opened the back of the SUV. I put your medicines in the blue case. The red sweater is still damp, so I left it hanging in the laundry room. You have enough clothes for at least a week. I'm not going back in a week. Then what are you doing? I don't know yet. That's not a plan. No, it's Tuesday. Corinne pulled out the first suitcase and wheeled it beneath the awning. The wheels caught in the gravel. She had to lift it. She set it down harder than necessary. Silas reached for the larger one. I can manage, Corinne snapped. I know. Something in his answer disarmed her. She let him take it. The green tin, Ottilie asked. I didn't see it. Top dresser drawer. I didn't go through every drawer, only the ones. Corinne stopped. Only the ones I needed. And the ceramic dog. Corinne hesitated. What ceramic dog? The ugly one. Oh, that. You thought what? Corinne closed the back of the SUV. I didn't pack it. Thorne had brought that dog home from Waynesville in 1982. Its eyes had never learned to point in the same direction. One ear had chipped during the move to the house on Elm Avenue. Audley had never particularly liked it. She had kept it for 43 years, and Corinne knew that. Bring it when you bring the rest of my things. The rest. The blue dress, thorn shirts, the green tin, my sewing box, the photographs from the hallway. Mom, Larkspur Hollow is furnished. There isn't room. I'm not going to Larkspur Hollow. Corinne rubbed both hands over her face, smearing rain across her cheeks. Where are you going? Audley looked toward the old studio. Ivy had climbed one corner and a gutter sagged above the door. She could see the brown water stain on the ceiling through the small window, dark as tea. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. I called you this morning. You ended the call. You ended the conversation before you packed the bags. Corinne got into her SUV. Before closing the door, she said, Whitfield thinks you're doing this to break us up. I have never needed to work that hard to dislike Whitfield. Silas coughed once into his shoulder. Corinne backed out too fast, tires spraying gravel, and the silver SUV was gone before Audley could add anything her daughter might use later. For a long minute, nobody spoke. Rain tapped the awning. Somewhere out in Alpha, the failing heater caught with a hollow bang ran for a moment and stopped. That's not supposed to bang like that. No. How long has it been doing that? 6 months. Why haven't you replaced it? Silas looked at her carefully. Never mind. I know why. He picked up the smaller suitcase and started toward the studio. Audley followed. The path was gravel and mud, and her sensible shoes were not sensible enough for either. Silas slowed without seeming to slow. The studio door stuck at the bottom. He shouldered it open. The room was worse than she remembered. A narrow bed against one wall beneath a brown water stain. A small table. A 2-burner stove. A refrigerator with a handwritten sign taped to it. Push hard. Stacks of empty nursery trays filled the only chair. Silas shoved the trays aside. Temporary storage. Apparently everything is temporary. He gave her a look. He did not ask. The first suitcase held 7 pairs of underwear, 3 bras, 2 nightgowns, 5 blouses, 4 pairs of elastic waist pants, slippers, sneakers, and the navy cardigan Audley was already wearing. Corinne had rolled each piece to save space. On top of the second suitcase sat the blue medication case and a Ziploc of toiletries. Beneath them were Audley's paperbacks, her charging cable, the framed photograph of Thorne standing beside a ridiculous snowman at Baden Lake in 2004, and the old bottle of aftershave he had stopped wearing years before he died. Audley sat on the edge of the bed. She picked up the aftershave. Corinne had wrapped it in 2 washcloths so it would not break. Silas busied himself with the heater against the wall. He struck the metal cover with the heel of his hand until the unit coughed warm air. She hates that smell. Hukum Corinne says it smells like a barber shop. It does. She packed it anyway. Silas adjusted the vent. People are inconvenient. The room blurred. She blinked until it sharpened again. I'm not crying. Good. There's mildew. Tears will encourage it. She laughed once against her will. It hurt her chest. Silas found clean sheets in a cabinet and changed the bed while Audley protested from the chair. He plugged in a lamp. He tested the phone. He set a bottle of water beside her medication case. You can stay at my house. My sister only uses the spare room twice a year. I'm staying here. My couch is better than this mattress. Your couch would make me a guest. He tucked one corner of the sheet. That's the spirit. You always were impossible after treatment. The rebuke slipped out before she could pull it back. Silas straightened. You haven't seen me after treatment in years. He did not answer that directly. He crossed to the door, checked the latch, tested the deadbolt, and looked at her again. Outside, the last light was leaking out of the November sky. Water dripped from the awning in that slow, uneven rhythm that had begun during Corinne's confrontation and had not stopped since. You want soup, not yours. Silas waited. He set the bottle of water an inch to the left, then an inch back to where it had been, which was how he collected himself when the collecting had to be quiet. My sister sent a jar, beans and tomatoes. She thinks tomatoes are wholesome. They are wholesome. They are also potassium. Then a diner sandwich. Yes. He nodded once and left the studio door open the width of his hand behind him. She heard him crunch across the gravel toward the retail building. She sat on the edge of the bed with Thorne's aftershave in her lap, and the rain on the roof, and a small ache moving through her left arm, the way it always moved after treatment. Somewhere in the rafters above her head, a floorboard shifted. Then another. Ottilie looked up. A cat came down from the ceiling. Not from the ceiling exactly. From a narrow opening between the wall and the roof beam where the studio had never quite been finished. The cat descended along a shelf, along a windowsill, along the top of the refrigerator, and onto the floor with an economy of motion that suggested he had been doing this for a while. I was thin, not starving thin, working thin. He had a notched left ear that had healed clean but crooked. His muzzle was gray. His right eye was clouded milky, the kind of clouded that meant he had lost the use of it years ago. His left forepaw was single white against the rest of him, which was tabby orange fading toward rust at the flanks. His tail was orange for most of its length and ended in an inch of pure black, as though he had dipped it in ink and forgotten. He sat down 3 feet from Ottilie and studied her with his one good eye. "Hello," she said. The cat did not answer. He was, however, unimpressed. Ottilie reached slowly into the paper bag Silas had brought earlier and broke off half of a biscuit from breakfast. She set the biscuit on the floor between them. The cat looked at her. The cat looked at the biscuit. The cat ate the biscuit without hurrying. When he had finished, he sat back down and rearranged his tail so that the black tip lay across his one white paw. He did not leave. Wickham. Not a question. A recognition. Aunt Idella had named her cat Wickham in 1965 because she said the name suited an animal who would take advantage of a situation. She had died in 1997. Odom had taken her cat, and then the next cat and the next. Odom had named every cat in that line Wickham because he said naming was work and he had done enough work. The last Wickham Ottilie had known personally had been an orange male with a notched ear who died in 2019, the year Thorne died. Ottilie had assumed the line had ended. The cat in front of her had the notched ear. Different notch, same left side. The gray muzzle was new. The clouded right eye was new. The single white forepaw was old family business. "Which one are you?" The cat's tail flicked once. The black tip lifted and settled. "All right then, Wickham it is." Silas came back with a paper bag from the diner. He stopped inside the door when he saw the cat. "You've met him." "I recognize the line. He came around after your father died. Wouldn't take a name from me. He'd take food, but not a name." "That is because he had a name already." Silas set the bag on the table. He looked at the cat with the careful expression of a man who had lost an argument once and did not intend to open the file again. "Odom used to say something about roots," Ottilie said. Silas glanced at her. "He said a lot of things about roots. There was one in particular. Roots need air, so does everything else." The words dropped into the studio quietly. They rearranged the room by the smallest amount. Rearranged the room by the smallest amount. He said it every March when we uncovered the beds, and every October when we covered them again. Twice a year for how many years? Long enough that I say it now without meaning to. Ottilie looked at the framed photograph of Thorne on the little table. Thorne had not particularly cared for gardening. He had cared for Ottilie's father in the way a good son-in-law cares for a father-in-law who has become a fact of the marriage. He had once said Odom's advice about roots was the only thing he had ever heard the old man say that made sense to a man who owned tools. Fair enough. Silas set the diner bag beside her. Scrambled eggs, white toast, grilled chicken without salt. She could smell the chicken in her stomach, which had been on strike since Delma pulled the needles, changed its mind about the day. "I'm going to eat." "That's the plan. You're not going to hover." "I'm going to check the heater and pretend not to hover." "Acceptable." He left the door open the width of his hand again. She heard him move toward the office. The office phone began to ring. It rang 5 times before he answered it, which meant the fax machine was probably lying to itself again about the weather. Ottilie ate slowly. Wickham stayed. He did not beg. He watched her the way an accountant watches a client who has just admitted to something interesting. She was on the last piece of toast when the office phone rang a second time, then a third. On the fifth ring, she heard Silas answer it low and short. On the sixth ring, a different call minutes later, she heard him say her name. Ottilie. She looked up. He was standing at the studio door. For you. Bexley Threlkeld. Ottilie set down the toast. Bexley Threlkeld's brick house sat on the west side of Larkin Avenue with a wall facing due west soil, like powdered chalk in an iron gate. Odom had once backed his truck into in 1978. Ottilie could still see the dented fender as if it were parked outside. Bexley was 76 now and had been 76 for as long as Ottilie could remember. Some women arrive at that age and refuse to move on out of respect for the achievement. Her winterberries. She wouldn't say, wanted the woman. Which woman? Odom's Ottilie. The correction landed. Odom's Ottilie. As though she had been away for a decade and had returned wearing the same coat. She got up more slowly than she wanted to. Silas did not offer his arm. She was grateful for that. He walked ahead of her toward the office in a way that put him within reach without pretending to be within reach. The office door stuck at the bottom. Silas leaned into it. The room was worse than the studio, if that was possible. Paper covered every flat surface. Some stacks were clipped together. Others had grown around coffee cups, catalogs, gloves, and a cracked plastic pot with 3 dead pens. A space heater sat unplugged beneath her father's desk. On the wall behind it hung the same calendar from the year he had died, still open to October. He had died in October. She could not remember the exact day without looking. Ottilie picked up the receiver. Mrs. Threlkeld, this is Ottilie Rensmark. There was a small silence, the kind an old woman lets sit before she decides to spend a syllable. Ottilie, you have your father's phone voice. He would have hated that. He would have been correct to. I have called this number 4 times in 6 weeks. Nobody with any sense answered until today. Ottilie leaned against the edge of the desk. Her knees told her that leaning would soon become sitting. How can I help, Mrs. Threlkeld? My winterberries. Half of them are dead. Along the west wall. You remember. I remember Earl planted them where roots could not breathe. Bexley's laugh cracked like a dry twig. Earl has been dead 9 years, and I still enjoy hearing when he was wrong. Ottilie smiled without meaning to. How many died? 2 last summer, 3 over the winter. The rest looked sickly. A lawn company came out and told me to replace them with something called Golden Mop. Do not. That is what I told them. But I need someone from Larkspur to come and confirm I am right, so that I have an ally when Golden Mop returns. Friday morning. Friday morning, after 10, I do not drive at night anymore, and I refuse to be put at the end of the day like your Silas has been doing since 2019. Hi is standing right here. Then tell him the dwarf spruce he sold me is not dwarf. No tree respects adjectives, Mrs. Threlkeld. Bexley. Bexley. Ottilie wrote the appointment on the back of an envelope from the county tax office. Her hand cramped halfway through and the final digits of the address climbed uphill. Silas watched her write from the doorway without moving. When she hung up, the dial tone hummed against her ear for a moment before she set the receiver down. She had just committed to being alive on Friday morning. She had committed to being alive Wednesday and Thursday in order for Friday morning to exist. Somewhere in her chest, a small, disagreeable warmth was trying to be a feeling. She was not ready to name it. Silas was still in the doorway. That was Bexley Threlkeld. I heard. She thinks I work here. You answered the phone. Once. Once is a start. Ottilie looked around the office. The past due invoices, the stamped envelope she recognized from the county seal, the unplugged space heater, the dead pens, the calendar still open to October 7 years ago. How bad you want that answer today? I want that answer before I lie down. Silas stepped inside and closed the door the width of his hand behind him. He picked up an invoice from the top of the nearest stack. The paper had softened at the corners from being handled too many times by a man alone. $6,480 to the regional grower 60 days past due. Property tax first installment paid. Second installment due January. Payroll clears if the Sedgwick contract closes. Propane paid through December, thank God. Insurance is a story. Insurance is always a story. This one is longer than most. He set the invoice down. She waited for the number. $8,400. Of what? Of my money in the operating account. Over the last 14 months, some came back when the larger accounts paid. I am personally short $7,003. Audley set both hands on the desk. You had no right. Silas laughed once, not the amused laugh, the other one. That is a remarkable choice of words today. The office fell quiet. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. A single drip fell from the metal awning onto the concrete step in a slow, uneven rhythm. Somewhere far behind them past Alpha, a heater caught with a hollow bang and did not run more than 7 minutes before it stopped. Wickham the cat crossed the doorway from the studio. He did not look at either of them. He passed through the office as though he had business elsewhere, which he did. He went up over the desk, along the filing cabinet, into the small window Odom had once cut for the barn owl that had lived in the rafters through the winter of 1994. He looked back once. His one good eye caught the light. His notched left ear stood up. Then he was gone. Silas watched him go. Your father's cat. Aunt Idella's cat. Same line. Same everything. Silas looked at her. He seemed on the verge of saying something else. He did not. I need to sit down. He gave her the padded chair by the desk. He cleared it by pushing 2 cartons of plant labels onto the floor. She sat. The room did not tilt. The room was not required to tilt to make her afraid. She was already afraid. Outside, the light was fading. The mist had thickened into fog along the ground. From the studio, faintly, she could hear the small metallic click of the refrigerator that required a person to push hard. From Alpha, a hollow bang. From the office desk drawer, the low, careful ticking of a small brass clock her father had wound every Sunday of his life until the Sunday he could not. Someone would need to wind it soon. It had 2, maybe 3 days left before it stopped, and once a clock like that stopped, it did not always agree to start again. Audley folded her hands together on the desk, and for the first evening in 18 months, she did not feel like a guest anywhere on earth. Audley slept badly and woke twice, once at 2:14 when Alpha's heater tried to catch and failed, once at 4:38 when Wickham stepped across her ankles on his way to somewhere she was not invited. At 6, she gave up. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the studio and watched the window turn from black to gray to the color of old tin. A delivery truck woke the driveway before dawn by leaning on its horn. She dressed slowly. The blue medication case was where Corinne had left it, the pills in their slots exactly as Corinne would have arranged them. Corinne had a good memory for a daughter who claimed to be tired all the time. Audley swallowed the morning dose, drank half the bottle of water Silas had left, and went to the office. Silas was at the loading bay with the driver arguing. I can't unload without payment. You unloaded last month. Last month, your account wasn't cash only. Silas turned when Audley's shoes crunched the gravel, and his face went through 3 small movements before it settled. He had slept even less than she had. There was mud on his boots that had dried and cracked in a pattern she recognized from her father's boots. The driver held out an invoice, $1,842 for a pallet of bagged nursery soil. Audley could feel Silas waiting for her to reach for her checkbook. She did not. Put it back on the truck. Silas's eyes opened. We need the soil. Then we need $1,840. And how do you suggest we get it? Behind him, the office phone began to ring. By answering that, the caller was Portia Sedgwick, calling from a hotel called Wexford House on the west side of Salisbury. She wanted to know whether Larkspur still delivered. Audley sat down at the desk while Silas stood in the loading bay, watching the driver strap the pallet back onto the truck. Portia needed 24 azaleas 3-gallon whites for the front of the reception building. Her landscaper said Friday, "You do not want azaleas. I am looking at the landscaper's list. Is the sprinkler still running that bed every morning?" A pause. "I assume so." "Then 24 azaleas will give you a lovely 3-week display, followed by a funeral." Portia laughed once. It was a laugh from a woman who had not laughed at anything before 9 in the morning in about a year. Audley recognized the sound. She had made it herself in 2019, twice both times, to the surprise of the person she was making it at. She asked about sun, she asked about drainage, she asked about the color of the building and whether guests brushed the bed when entering. Portia answered. Silas came into the office and wrote in the margin of a seed catalog, "Inkberry 18 good, 7 maybe, Sweet Spire 30, no delivery Friday." Audley underlined the last 3 words with a pencil that needed sharpening. "We have inkberries, evergreen, cleaner shape than what you had before, less dramatic about wet feet. 18 would fill the space if your landscaper knows how to stagger them. Can you send photos?" "Yes." Silas shook his head at the desk. Audley ignored him. "And I will need a deposit before we hold them." "Half." "Your company never required that before." "Our company has made several mistakes before." Portia asked the price. Audley covered the mouthpiece with her palm. 38 each, Silas whispered. Audley uncovered it. 42 each, delivery 150, we hold for 7 days. Silas's mouth twitched. Portia complained. She calculated. She agreed to come inspect the plants that afternoon. It was not a sale. No money had changed hands. But when Audley hung up, the delivery truck was still in the yard. "Tell him to wait. He charges by the minute after 8. Then be charming. I have used my annual supply." The driver refused to split the shipment. He agreed to return at the end of his route if they had payment by 4. As his truck pulled away, Silas stood in the empty space it had occupied and looked at his boots. "We could have paid him. With your retirement. With the operating account. How much is in it? Enough for the soil or Friday's payroll?" His silence answered the rest. She pushed herself up from the office chair. "Show me the inkberries." "Can you walk that far?" "Don't start." "I'm asking." "You're asking with your face already arranged around the answer." He considered that. "Can you?" "Yes," slowly. The inkberries occupied 2 rows behind Beta. Their leaves were dark and glossy from the rain. The pot stood in black puddles on the ground cloth. Audley touched the first plant, bending a branch between her fingers. "Leggy." New growth fills in. She moved on to the next pot. Silas crouched to examine the roots of the plant she had just released, and she noticed for the first time that his hands were bigger than she remembered, or perhaps only more careful. Rain darkened the cuffs of his shirt where they had caught on the leaves. He turned each pot so the fuller side faced the aisle without hurrying, the way a man turns a photograph in a frame to catch the light. "This one has leaf spot," Audley said. "That one's in the 7, maybe." "You said 18 good." Silas moved to the next row without answering. He counted under his breath. 12, 13. He set aside a pot with a broken leader. 14, he straightened a label. 15. "There are 18 good," he said finally. "The 2 behind the pallet are cleaner than these. I forgot them." Audley almost laughed. She moved down the row, counting for herself. By the 9th pot, her breathing had changed. By the 12th, the muscles in her thighs felt as though she had climbed a hill. Silas dragged over an overturned bucket without comment. "I don't need that." "Then it'll enjoy the scenery." Audley sat. She sat because he had not made a performance of the bucket. He continued inspecting the plants. His hands were thick, the nails rimmed with soil, the movements gentler than his voice. "These aren't the old compact variety." "No." "Which cultivar?" "Strongbox." Odom would have hated the name. He did. "It came in while you were gone." The phrase contained no accusation this time. That made room for something else. "Tell me about it." Silas glanced at her, then explained the plant's habit, its growth rate, its tolerance for pruning. He had tried 6 before ordering a larger batch. 2 had failed in the summer heat of 2023. 4 had done well. When he finished, she said, 42 is still fair. 44 would be fair. You said 38. I panicked. You criticized my charm. He almost smiled. A white sedan turned into the drive. Marta Wenmore parked beside the office and got out with a canvas tote on one shoulder and 2 coffees in a cardboard tray. She was 68, 3 years younger than her brother, and wore her silver hair cut close around her face. Her gaze found Audley on the bucket, then traveled to the studio door and the suitcases visible inside through the crack. Silas said you were here. He did not say you had moved in. I didn't use the phrase moved in. You said Audley's in the studio and won't leave. That is accurate. Marta handed Audley a coffee. Decaf, 1 sugar. If the dialysis people object, they can drive out here and fight me. Audley wrapped both hands around the cup. You remembered. I remember everybody's coffee. It is why I dislike them personally. Marta gave Silas the other cup and kept none for herself. Inside the office, she opened her tote and removed 3 thick folders, a calculator and a yellow legal pad. Silas made the low sound of a man about to be sorted. You called her, Audley asked. He did not. I checked the business account this morning and saw that our soil supplier tried to run a payment that would have left $116. I came to kill him. We sent the soil back, Silas said. Then I'll injure him. Marta cleared the desk with ruthless efficiency. Invoices went into one stack, customer orders into another, trash onto the floor beside Silas's boots. Audley sat across from her. How much has he put in, Audley? Marta looked at her brother. You told her. She found an invoice. She can read. How inconvenient for you. Marta opened the first folder without looking away from him. 12,000 over 14 months. Some came back when larger accounts paid, so he is personally short 7,003. Silas moved toward the door. Sit down, both women said. He remained standing. He did not leave. They spent the next hour sorting obligations from habits. Propane could not wait. Neither could insurance. Neither could payroll. Larkspur had ordered 4 varieties of ornamental grass every year for a decade because Odom had liked the way they moved in the wind. The grasses had never sold. Silas had maintained an early opening schedule that produced almost no sales before 10 and required extra staffing. You're paying someone to open at 7, Audley said. Landscapers come early. 2 landscapers came before 9 last month. 1 used the bathroom and bought nothing. He brought his own coffee, Silas muttered. They found small waste everywhere, deliveries made without minimum orders, plants held for customers who never returned, wholesale accounts still receiving prices set 3 years earlier. None of it dramatic enough to explain the nursery's condition alone. Together, the leaks had nearly emptied it. At 11, the office phone rang. Audley reached for it. Silas put his hand over the receiver. Before you answer, what exactly are you doing here? She looked at his hand. At the nursery, not the studio. I'm helping for a day. I don't know. Are you taking over? Marta stopped writing. Audley looked at the calendar behind Silas's head. October. Still October. 7 years of Octobers. I don't know that either. That's not good enough. No, it isn't. He removed his hand from the phone. She let it ring one more time before answering. Let that sit. A man had emptied his savings to keep a place open for a woman who hadn't walked through it in 9 months. He didn't want to thank you. He wanted her to see, and she was starting to see. But seeing was not the same as staying, and both of them knew it, and neither of them was ready to say so. The caller was a man asking whether they carried peach trees. Audley checked with Silas, quoted the current price rather than the one she remembered, and told the caller they would hold the tree for 24 hours, not indefinitely. At noon, Marta drove to a sandwich shop and returned with 3 orders. Audley ate half of hers and put the rest in the studio refrigerator beneath the sign that instructed her to push hard. Wickham arrived shortly after. He accepted a small square of turkey. He did not accept the bread. He then settled on the windowsill and closed his one good eye against the pale sun that had begun to push through the clouds. Portia Sedgwick arrived at 1:30 in heels entirely unsuited to nursery gravel. She inspected the inkberries, asked whether they could be made more symmetrical, and frowned at the price. Audley let Silas explain the plans. When Portia asked for a discount, he said they could reduce the delivery charge if her landscaper loaded them himself. Portia paid the half deposit with a company card. After processing fees, it was not enough to buy the soil. It was combined with what was already in the account enough to cover it without touching payroll. Silas called the driver. At 3, the truck returned. The pallet came off the liftgate. Silas signed the invoice while Marta watched the bank balance on her phone. The achievement felt embarrassingly small. One pallet of soil had left and come back. But the soil belonged to the business now and not to Silas's private account. Audley was labeling Portia's plants when Corinne's SUV appeared. The blue dress hung from a hook behind the passenger seat. Through the rear window, Audley could see Thorne's shirts folded inside a clear storage bin, the sewing box balanced on top. Corinne got out carrying the green tin under one arm. She looked at Audley sitting behind the office counter with a marker in her hand. "You worked all day, most of it, after dialysis." Dialysis was yesterday. "I know when your dialysis is." Audley capped the marker. "Where are the hallway photographs?" "In the car." "And the dog?" Corinne's grip tightened around the green tin. "I couldn't find it." The answer came too fast. Audley looked at her daughter's face, then at the items carefully arranged in the vehicle. "All right," she thought. "All right, we will not do this today." "All right," she said aloud. Corinne set the tin on the counter. "Your next treatment is tomorrow. I called the transport company. They can't change your pickup location until next week." "I'll handle it." "How?" "I said I'll handle it." "So you don't have a ride?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Corinne took a breath. "I'll be here at 5:30. "No." "Then miss dialysis to prove a point." The office seemed to contract around them. Corinne's eyes moved over the past due invoices, the yellow pad, the mud drying on Audley's sensible shoes. "Silas will take me," Audley said. Corinne looked toward the window where Silas was crossing between the plant rows with a coil of hose across one shoulder. She turned back and let out a short breath that was not quite a laugh. Audley almost matched it. The moment folded up between them like a letter neither of them intended to send. Corinne carried the bin into the studio and returned without comment. On her second trip, she brought the hallway photographs pressed to her chest, glass facing inward. "You left marks on the wall." "Pictures do that." "I never noticed how many there were." There had been 11. Thorne fishing from a dock at Baden Lake. Emmett squinting into the sun at his college graduation. Corinne on her second wedding anniversary, before the marriage had begun to spoil in ways visible only in hindsight. Odom standing beside a truckload of dogwoods, his expression suggesting the photographer had interrupted important work. Corinne placed the photographs on the counter. "Where do you want these?" "I'll decide." "I can hang them." "I'll decide." Her daughter's mouth tightened, but she nodded. Last came the green tin. Its paint had worn away at the corners. Inside were Audley's marriage certificate, Thorne's discharge papers, a small stack of letters tied with twine, 2 pieces of jewelry she rarely wore, and a receipt for the ceramic dog. Thorne had put the receipt there as a joke after Audley complained that nobody would believe he had paid $6 for something so ugly. Corinne watched her open the lid. "You didn't pack any of that the first time." "I didn't know what was in it." "You didn't ask." "You weren't home." Audley looked up. Corinne closed her eyes briefly. "I know, I hear it." The office phone rang. Silas answered from the greenhouse extension before either woman moved. Corinne glanced toward the studio. "It smells damp." "It is damp." "That's bad for your access." "My access is bandaged. An infection doesn't care. Neither does mold, generally." "This is what you prefer." Ottilie closed the tin. This is what I chose. That isn't the same thing. No, it's more important. Corinne absorbed that without replying. Through the window, Silas crossed between the plant rows carrying a coil of hose. He did not look toward the office, though Ottilie suspected he had timed his route to remain visible. Corinne stood with one hand on the doorframe, searching Ottilie's face for the argument she had prepared to defeat. What do you want me to do tonight? In general. It was a larger question than either of them could safely answer in a damp office at the end of a workday. Find the dog. Corinne's gaze dropped. She did not answer. At 5:30, she was not there. Silas took Ottilie to dialysis Thursday morning in the nursery truck. The cab still contained pruning shears, empty coffee cups, a broken umbrella, and 3 clipboards. He placed a single clean handkerchief on her seat before she got in. Neither of them spoke about Corinne. Neither of them needed to. During treatment, Ottilie's phone stayed face down on the blanket. Verlie Ashton in the next recliner watched her without appearing to watch her. So you're at the plant place. Nursery. Oh Lord, you've caught it. Apparently it is contagious. Verlie turned a page of her magazine. How bad's the room? Damp. Bathroom. Yes. Door locks. Mostly. Food. Silas brought eggs. He also taped his phone number to the wall. That's practically a proposal at our age. Ottilie laughed and immediately regretted moving. Delma looked over in warning from the station. Verlie returned to her magazine and did not press further until the machines were nearly finished. Then manager who took my job at the Piedmont Grand called yesterday. Asked if I'd fill in this weekend. I told her no. Because I retired for a reason. Because my ankles have opinions. Because I have been cursed at by bride salesman drunks and one state senator in a bathrobe. And I intend to spend my remaining years cursing back at people who cannot get away. Ottilie considered the ceiling tiles. 42. My phone rings all day. People heard Odom's daughter answered it Tuesday, and now they call to see if I'm still there. Are you still there? For today. Then you need somebody who can talk while sitting down. Ottilie turned her head. I answered a phone for 28 years, Verlie said. I have been the last human voice a wedding party heard before the honeymoon. I have located luggage that was never lost. I have absorbed language that would peel paint off a battleship. Your customers cannot frighten me. We cannot afford another employee. Then don't hire one. I need rides on Thursdays. Silas has a truck. Marta appears to enjoy assigning value to things. Ottilie glanced at the machine beside her, then back. Say yes before I remember I retired. Yes. Verlie smiled. She did not press her advantage. That was one of the reasons she was going to be very good at Ottilie's front desk. At the nursery that afternoon, Marta wrote Verlie into a schedule. Thursday afternoons and Saturday mornings. Silas's driving would count as delivery mileage. Verlie's phone hours would count as wages entered against her account. If there was no money to pay them now, they became an owner. Draw owed not a favor, nobody remembered correctly. Invisible work is how families lie to themselves, Marta said and closed the folder. The next week, the phone stopped bleeding orders. Verlie took 3 deposits Thursday afternoon. On Friday morning at 10:30, Silas drove Ottilie to Bexley Threlkeld's brick house on Larkin Avenue. Bexley was waiting in the drive with a cane she used primarily to point at things. You're late. It's 10:26. I was promised 10:30. I like time to prepare my disappointment. Bexley had tied a silk scarf beneath her chin, despite there being no wind. She greeted Silas with the suspicion reserved for tradesmen who had previously sold her something capable of growing. The winter berries along the west wall looked worse than Ottilie had expected. Bare branches rose from damp soil compacted into a gray crust. One surviving shrub leaned outward as though attempting escape. Silas crouched and pushed his fingers into the bed. This is soaked. I watered yesterday. For how long? The sprinkler runs 20 minutes. Ottilie followed the line of irrigation heads. One had been turned directly toward the wall where water had nowhere to go. Moss darkened the lower bricks. When did you add the stone border? Earl did, the year before he died. He raised the edge, but not the bed. Bexley frowned. Water used to run into the lawn. Now the stone holds it here. The roots are sitting wet. Earl again. Partly. The sprinkler is yours. That sounds balanced enough to be true. Silas dug around the base of a dead shrub and exposed blackened roots. Ottilie would have liked to kneel beside him, but getting down was easier than getting back up. She stayed standing until Bexley tapped a wrought iron chair with her cane. If you fall in my flower bed, I will have to offer refreshments to the ambulance people. Ottilie sat. Silas, without looking up from the roots. Roots need air, so does everything else. Bexley's head turned sharply. Odom used to say that. Yes, ma'am. He said it the year he refused to replace my hollies. That's the year he was right. Bexley almost laughed. They recommended removing the dead winterberries, lifting the soil level, redirecting the irrigation, and replacing only part of the row with inkberries after drainage improved. Bexley disliked the cost. She rejected 2 varieties because their names sounded foolish. She approved 12 plants after Silas promised none of them were described as whimsical. She wrote a deposit check at her kitchen counter. Your father would have replaced all of them. He would have charged you for all of them. He would have told me the wall was wrong. It is. Yes, but you waited until after I signed the check. Better manners. Bexley kept her pen and studied Ottilie for a long moment. Odom used to pretend you were coming back. Ottilie looked toward the window where Silas was rinsing mud from a trowel with a hose. Did he? Every spring he'd say, Ottilie will handle the accounts when she gets sense. Then in summer, Ottilie will choose next year's stock. By fall, he'd be furious you hadn't done the thing he never asked you to do. That sounds like him. It sounds like several marriages, too. Ottilie folded the check once, then flattened it again. I'm not back because he wanted me here. Good, he's dead. Being obeyed would only encourage him. On the drive back, Ottilie held the deposit envelope in her lap. The visit had taken less than an hour, and fatigue pulled at her shoulders anyway. Stop at Corinne's. Silas glanced over. My pharmacy delivery went there yesterday. I need the red sweater too. Is she home? She's at work. And the other one, Whitfield, the man whose dislike requires effort. I don't know. Whitfield's car was in the driveway. Boxes stood inside the open garage labeled Kitchen Office and Records in thick black marker. Whitfield emerged carrying a desk lamp. He was 48 trim, careful about his clothes even while moving. Today he wore dark jeans, loafers without socks, and a quarter-zip sweater Ottilie had given him for Christmas. He set down the lamp. Ottilie! Whitfield! Silas left the truck running. I didn't expect you. I didn't expect you until Sunday. My movers had a cancellation. How fortunate for someone. He looked towards Silas, then back at her. Can we talk? I came for a package. It's inside. He led her through the garage. His espresso machine already occupied the kitchen counter where Ottilie's bread box had been. The bread box sat on the floor beside a carton. The house did not look transformed. That was the disturbing part. A few objects had shifted and the space had accepted him without protest. Her red sweater still hung above the dryer. She folded it over her arm and followed Whitfield down the hallway. The door to her old room stood open. The bed had been stripped to the mattress. Pale rectangles marked where the photographs had hung. Whitfield's desk occupied the wall opposite the window, its computer monitor still wrapped in foam. 2 leather chairs sat where Ottilie's dresser had been. You work from home 3 days a week. So this is your office. Corinne thought it made sense. Corinne thinks many things make sense after arranging them. Whitfield rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't tell her to pack your bags, but you told her the situation wasn't sustainable. He hesitated. For anybody. For your desk. He lowered his voice, though they were alone. Corinne was constantly worried. If you were 10 minutes late, she assumed you'd fallen. She wouldn't travel. She wouldn't stay at my place. Every plan depended on your treatment schedule. My treatment schedule did not require her attendance. That isn't how fear works. It was close enough to what Verley had said that Ottilie disliked hearing it from him. Whitfield retrieved the pharmacy box from the dining table. My father refused help until a fall put him in rehab. I know what this looks like. Do you? There's also the mortgage issue. There is for Corinne. She planned on your contribution through the end of the year. Could you keep part of it going for 60 days just until my old security deposit comes back and we combine accounts? Ottilie stared at him. You moved into a house you cannot afford unless the woman you displaced keeps paying for it. That isn't fair. No, it isn't. Whitfield stepped back. Corinne said you'd turn this into money. Corinne packed my medication before she packed my marriage certificate. She turned it into money. Ottilie took the pharmacy box. On the counter near the front door sat her spare house key, the one she had carried for 18 months. Corinne had apparently removed it from her keyring before delivering the suitcases, then left it there because she could not decide what came next. Ottilie placed her own key beside it. The ceramic dog was nowhere in the house. Not on the shelves, not among the objects Corinne had set aside. Whitfield watched her look. Missing something. My daughter knows what. She walked out carrying the pharmacy box and the red sweater. Silas said nothing until they had turned onto Sable Ridge Road. Then he glanced at the sweater in her lap. Get what you needed. Ottilie looked back once, though the house had already disappeared behind the trees, enough to stop going back. A dark rental sedan was parked beside the office when they returned. Emmett stood beneath the awning with a wheeled suitcase at his feet. He wore a tan raincoat over the clothes he used for traveling. Pressed shirt, dark trousers, shoes too polished for gravel. You told me not to fly in. I remember. So I flew in. That approach must be useful in your marriage. He reached for the pharmacy box. She let him take it partly because her arms were tired and partly because refusing every kindness had begun to feel like another form of surrender. Emmett looked at Silas. Emmett Rensmark, Corinne's older brother. Silas. Silas carried Bexley's deposit into the office, leaving them beside the truck. Emmett studied the nursery. His attention moved automatically to the sagging gutter, the patched greenhouse plastic, the cracked paving, the peeling trim. He managed commercial properties for a living in Denver. Buildings confessed to him. Is that where you're staying? The studio, yes. It looks condemned. It isn't. Have you had it inspected? By whom the king? I'm serious. So am I. There is no king. He picked up his suitcase and followed her inside. The room had improved slightly since Tuesday. Silas had removed the nursery trays. Marta had brought a small rug that disguised most of the stained floor. Ottilie had arranged the hallway photographs along the wall rather than hanging them. Emmett put down the box. He opened the bathroom, ran the tap, looked beneath the sink, and pressed 2 fingers against the brown mark near the window. You're checking for moisture. I'm finding it. It rained. Water inside a wall is generally considered a defect. Silas said the roof leaks when rain blows east, and that reassured you. It was blowing west. Emmett turned. His face went through the small movements of a man deciding not to say the thing he had rehearsed on the plane. What replaced it was worse. The tender expression people used when they had moved from argument to management. I toured Larkspur Hollow this morning. Ottilie sat on the edge of the bed. Of course you did. It's clean. Rooms are larger than this. Transportation, emergency call system, renal meal plans. Did you choose curtains? Would you stop? You flew 3 states to inspect a room I refused. I flew here because you asked whether I would take you home and then hung up. I asked, you didn't answer. Our condo has stairs. So does Larkspur Hollow. It has an elevator. You've solved it then. He rubbed his forehead. Why are you fighting everyone? Because everyone arrived with an address. Now here's where I need you to picture this. A son 3 states away in a rental sedan. A daughter who used a vacation day to evict her mother in packing tape. A silent man who had emptied his retirement into a business he did not own. A grouchy widow on Larkin Avenue whose sprinkler had killed her winter berries. A cat named Wickham with a notched left ear, a gray muzzle, one clouded eye, one white forepaw, and a black-tipped orange tail eating scrambled eggs off the corner of a propagation bench. And a woman of 68 in a faded blue cardigan sitting on the edge of a narrow bed with a pharmacy box in her lap, being told gently that she did not know what was good for her. Emmett sat in the chair opposite her. His knees nearly touched the bed. You cannot live behind a failing business forever. I've been here 3 nights, Emmett, and you're already paying its bills. No, yet. He glanced toward the office. Corinne said the nursery is in trouble. Corinne did not know I was living here until Tuesday. She looked it up, tax records, business filings. Audley's irritation sharpened. You both discovered research after discovering conversation was difficult. How much is this costing you? Nothing yet. Yet. The studio was part of the property before your grandfather died. The unit was permitted for seasonal workers. It has heat, water, and electricity. That heater sounds like a helicopter, but it works. It's ambitious. Emmett. She folded the red sweater over her lap. Silas put 7,003 of his own money into this business. I learned that on Tuesday. He has kept it running while I avoided looking too closely. If anyone has been exploited here, it isn't me. Emmett glanced toward the door. Maybe he kept it running because he expected you to rescue it. Silas expects everybody to disappoint him. It saves time. So what's the plan? I'm working on one. He gave a disbelieving laugh. Corinne said that too. What else did Corinne say? That you canceled the transfer without warning. That you went to the house while she was at work and got into it with Whitfield. That you left your key. Those things are true. She cannot cover the mortgage alone. Then it is fortunate she is no longer alone. Whitfield's moving expenses are not my illness. Emmett stood. The room was too small for his frustration. He struck his shoulder against the blue dress on the door. The hanger rattled. You gave her the down payment. You offered to help monthly. Now you're using money to make her feel what you feel. The accuracy of it struck before she could defend herself. She had canceled the transfer because she no longer lived there. That was arithmetic. She had also known while pressing the button exactly what fear the missing money would produce in Corinne. Both could be true. I will pay my portion of the utilities through Tuesday. I will not pay the mortgage after being removed. That is the fair answer, Emmett. Not the most painful one. Some tension left his shoulders. Come stay at my hotel just while we sort this out. No, it has a proper roof. So does the county jail. You compare every option to confinement. You present every option with a checkout date. Before he could answer, a car turned into the drive. Corinne. Emmett looked guilty. I told her my flight landed. You formed a committee. I informed my sister. Corinne entered the studio without knocking. She had changed out of work clothes but still wore her employee badge. Her gaze went first to the green tin, then to the photographs, then to the red sweater in Audley's lap. You went into the house when I wasn't there. It was still my address at the pharmacy. You spoke to Whitfield. He spoke to me. He said you accused him of being broke. I described the arrangement. Emmett stepped between them, an act so familiar from their younger years that all three noticed it at once. We're not doing this, Corinne folded her arms. You called me. I didn't call you here to fight. Why did you call her here? Audley asked. Emmett turned his palms upward. Because we need to decide what happens next. No, I need to decide. You may decide what you are willing to do. Corinne laughed bitterly. There, that's Mom. She turns everything into an assignment. Because both of you keep offering opinions instead of effort. I packed an entire room. Yes. The words stopped her. Audley placed the sweater beside her. You packed the things that made me maintainable. You arranged transportation. You found renal meals. You took a vacation day. You did a great deal of work. That does not make the decision yours. I thought you would refuse because you refuse everything. I accepted your ride yesterday. After backing yourself into a corner, and you only offered it after creating the corner. Emmett sank into the chair. Could we lower the temperature about 40 degrees? Silas appeared in the open doorway carrying 3 paper cups. I brought coffee, then I heard voices and considered poison. Corinne looked at him. Did you ask her to work here? No. Are you paying her? No. Does she know the nursery can't make payroll without customer deposits? Silas's face hardened. She knows more about the accounts than you do. She's sick. She's also sitting right there. Corinne turned back to Ottilie. You left my house because you said I treated you like you couldn't make decisions. Now you're letting him use you for free. He has told me to stay out of the office repeatedly, Silas said. Emmett looked from one to the other. This is absurd. Sell the property. The room went quiet. He continued, encouraged by the absence of interruption. Not today. Get it appraised. Pay the debts. Repay Silas. Use what's left for somewhere decent. You don't have to save every broken thing Granddad touched. Silas set the coffees on the table. Audibly felt the old reflex rise to reject the idea because Emmett had spoken it. Because selling was the answer Odom's enemies had offered. Because surrender and choice could look identical from a distance. She refused the reflex. She asked Silas, "Do you want to sell?" He stared at her. "No." "Ask Marta." "I will." Emmett spread his hands. "And what do you want?" "I want to know whether this place can support itself without eating Silas's retirement or mine. If it cannot, I will decide what to do." "How long does that take?" "Longer than 3 days." Corinne leaned against the doorframe. For the first time since arriving, she looked tired rather than angry. She did not look repentant. She looked exhausted. "What do you want from us?" The answer Ottilie had always given was nothing. Nothing was clean and proud and poisonous. "I need the rest of my mail. Once a week is enough. I need my transport address changed, which I have already arranged for next week. Emmett, if you want to help look at the studio roof and tell me what is actually urgent, not what offends you professionally." He nodded slowly. Corinne stopped calling Larkspur hollow. "The deposit is yours. Use the room yourself. Take up painting." Silas coughed into his fist. "And the dog," Ottilie said. "Bring it back." Corinne's eyes moved toward the photographs. "I told you I couldn't find it." "You packed Thorne's aftershave, which was behind 3 shoe boxes in the closet. You found the dog." Color rose along Corinne's neck. Emmett looked at her. "What dog?" "An ugly ceramic dog. It's nothing." "Then why keep it?" "I didn't say I kept it." "You didn't have to," Ottilie said. Corinne pushed away from the door. "I have to go." She walked out. Emmett began after her, then stopped when Ottilie spoke. "Let her go. You always say that after pushing someone to the door." He followed his sister anyway. Ottilie sat very still. Silas handed her one of the coffees. "For the record, it's terrible." She drank. It was. The next morning she found Emmett on a ladder beside the studio. He wore old jeans and a sweatshirt from his college. A rented tool bag rested in the mud. "You stayed." He did not look down. "My return flight Sunday." "That isn't what I said." "I know." He pressed a probe against the trim near the gutter. The roof itself had 2 or 3 years if the flashing got repaired. The gutter was pulling water behind the siding. The window seal needed replacement. He listed these facts without invoicing them. Then he located the source of the damp behind the studio refrigerator. An old copper line supplying the ice maker had been capped years earlier badly. "There's an ice maker." There was. There is currently an irrigation system for mold. He shut off the line, cut away a square of softened paneling, and set a fan in front of the opening. The damage smelled unpleasant, but had not reached the framing. Silas inspected his work with arms folded. "You cut that crooked." "It's a temporary opening." "Temporary things are where permanent problems breed." "You run a greenhouse heater by hitting it." "Different system." The two men looked at each other. Ottilie said, "I would like to remind you both that I can hear." Neither acknowledged her. Emmett spent the rest of Saturday replacing the window seal, then wrote a repair list on one of Marta's legal pads. and divided it into urgent, before winter, and cosmetic. The sagging gutter was urgent. Peeling paint was cosmetic. The studio heater required servicing before winter, but the roof could wait if they repaired the flashing. By afternoon, the retail lot was full. A mild Saturday had drawn people who wanted to believe spring had arrived earlier than it had. Silas moved between the trees and shrubs. Marta operated the register. Verly sat at the second desk in her red blazer from her hotel years and watched the nursery come toward her as though she had been waiting for it. A man returned the peach tree he had bought 2 hours earlier. My wife says it's too small. How tall is your wife? He blinked. What? I'm trying to understand her expectations. The man looked toward Ottilie for support. Ottilie examined the tree's healthy buds. We can exchange it for the larger size. The difference is $80. We'll charge delivery if it doesn't fit in your vehicle. He looked offended by both numbers. Verly smiled. Or you can take this handsome young tree home and enjoy being right before your wife for perhaps 6 months. He kept the tree. Emmett watched the exchange from the office doorway. Do customers always come here to argue? They come to be reassured that money can make nature obedient. Can it? Not for $80. That afternoon, a black SUV Ali did not recognize turned into the drive and parked at the far end of the lot. Corinne got out from the driver's side. Whitfield got out from the passenger side. He was carrying a leather folder. Corinne was carrying the ceramic dog. If you've made it this far, stay. Because what she pulled out of that wall next was the reason her father had died smiling. And the reason the money crowd would soon wish they'd never counted her out. They walked across the gravel together. Corinne set the dog on the office counter without looking at Ottilie. Its crooked eyes still pointed in slightly different directions. Its left ear was still chipped. Its painted mouth still curved in an expression of foolish optimism. I found it. Yes. On my bookshelf, behind the atlas. Yes. Whitfield opened the leather folder. Ottilie, we've prepared an offer. The office went quiet. Silas came to the doorway. Verly stopped typing at the second desk. Marta looked up from a stack of receipts and did not move. Whitfield laid a single sheet of paper on the counter beside the ceramic dog. For the nursery and the adjoining 12 acres. As is, all cash, closing in 30 days, $85,000. Ottilie looked at the sheet without touching it. She looked at Corinne. Corinne did not look back. You brought my dog to soften the offer. That wasn't... Yes, it was. Whitfield cleared his throat. Ottilie, this is generous considering the roof is half gone. The heater is failing. Your soil supplier tried to run a payment last week that would have bounced. You're operating on customer deposits and volunteer labor. Generous. Yes. Generous considering the roof is half gone. Generous considering the heater is failing. Generous considering the volunteer labor. Generous. 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 That is a hard-working word today, Whitfield. Where did you learn to use it? He blinked. Silas had come inside without her hearing him. Marta had set down her pen. Verly had reached without looking for the office phone, which had just begun to ring, and pressed the receiver against her shoulder to silence it. Ottilie picked up the ceramic dog. She turned it once in her hand, the chip in the ear, the crooked eyes. The receipt Thorne had tucked into the green tin so nobody would believe him. No. One word. Whitfield waited. Corinne waited. Ottilie set the ceramic dog down on the counter facing the leather folder. That is my answer to your offer. The dog will remain here. Mom, no Corinne. Whitfield's face rearranged itself. Ottilie, we can revise the number. If you'll... No. The office door opened. The soil driver leaned in. Mr. Wenmore, I'm outside. Second load. Prepayment or I turn around. Silas looked at Marta. Marta looked at the bank balance on her phone. She shook her head once small. Send him back, Ottilie said without moving her eyes from Whitfield. We'll pay next week. Ma'am, that pallet was scheduled. Send him back. The door closed. Outside, the truck rumbled down the drive. On the counter, the ceramic dog looked at Whitfield with one eye and Corinne with the other, and made no comment about either of them. Whitfield closed his folder. Corinne did not speak. They left. The office phone rang again, and Verley answered it in the polished voice of a woman who had once told a state senator in a bathrobe that yes, in fact, his shoes were still at the front desk. Silas stood in the doorway a long moment before he spoke. We could have paid him with $85,000, with a deposit. How much is in the account? He did not answer. That was answer enough. Ottilie sat down at Odom's desk. Her hands were shaking. She placed them flat on the paper. Marta, bring me the 1998 ledger. Marta looked up. Which one? The green one. 1998. Odom kept them behind the propagation bench. I know where they are. Marta went. Ottilie waited. Silas stood in the doorway without moving. A ceramic dog stood on the counter. Wickham the cat came in from the studio, notched left ear. Forward gray muzzle, catching the last of the afternoon light. One white paw picking his way along the top of the filing cabinet, black-tipped orange tail trailing behind him. He settled on the window ledge and closed his one good eye against the sun. Marta returned with a slim green book bound in cloth. She placed it in front of Ottilie. 1998. Ottilie opened it. Odom's handwriting filled the first pages in his crooked column of dates, deliveries, weather notes. She turned pages until she reached October, then November. Then 3 weeks into November, on the right-hand side of a page, otherwise devoted to a bulk order of dogwoods, she found the line. The line was not in Odom's handwriting. The letters were angular. They leaned slightly leftward. The pen had been pressed harder than her father ever pressed a pen. The line read, Idella came today. She said Amory Broxton visited her at the boarding house, asking about our deed again. Watch him. She wrote this line herself because I could not. Ottilie set both hands on either side of the ledger and did not move for a long time. Silas came to the desk. Marta stood behind her. Neither of them spoke. Broxton, Amory, Whitfield's father, Whitfield's dead father, Amory Broxton, who had died in 2010 and whose brother, Callum Broxton, 61, sat at a desk in a law office in Salisbury with a bar license and a family history. Aunt Idella had come to Odom in November 1998 and had written that line with her own hand because something in Odom's hand had failed him that day. Ottilie closed the ledger. Marta. Yes. I need the rest. Every year Odom kept. They're in the vault behind the propagation bench. Silas showed me once. 1980 through last year. How many? Marta looked at Silas. Silas looked at Ottilie. 45. Outside past Alpha, the failing heater caught with a hollow bang. It ran 7 minutes. It stopped. The retail phone rang. Wickham did not open his eye. The ceramic dog watched the door. Ottilie stood up. Show me. The vault was behind the propagation bench in the shed that had been built into the granite shoulder the year Odom bought the property. Silas moved the bench aside. Marta stood with a flashlight. Ottilie held the 1998 ledger against her chest with both hands. The paneling looked ordinary. Walnut, dark with age, 4 vertical boards fitted to the raw stone behind them. Silas pressed his palm against the third board and pushed. The board gave. It was hinged not from the side but from the top, and it lifted like the lid of a shallow desk. Behind it, a compartment cut into the granite itself. Not deep, 2 feet by 3 no more, lined with oilcloth, and stacked inside wrapped in more oilcloth against the damp ledgers. Marta counted them silently while Silas held the flashlight. The beam moved across the spines. Some were green, some were dark green, some had faded to olive. All of them were cloth-bound in the same style, and each had a year written on the spine in Odom's crooked hand. 1980, 1981, 1982. Marta got to 45 before Ottilie stopped counting with her. Bring them all. They carried them to the office in 3 trips. Marta cleared the desk. Silas set the stack in the center. Verley, who had been on a call about mulch, ended the call, hung up, put a small handwritten sign on the counter that read, "Ring bell," and closed the office door behind her. "Do you want me here?" Verley asked. "Yes." "Then I am here." Audley sat. She did not open the top ledger. She opened the bottom one first. 1980. Odom would have been 52. Audley would have been 23, newly married, living an hour away, pregnant with Emmett. Wynne had still been alive. The nursery had still been young enough to have its original name painted in fresh cream. The first page held a list of orders. Dogwoods, winterberries. The names of customers, Audley half remembered. In the margin of the third page in Odom's handwriting, Amory Broxton came out today. Wants to buy the 12 acres. Offered 9,000. Told him no. He said I'd change my mind. She turned to 1981. Amory Broxton came back. 12,000. Told him no again. He asked if I knew what the land would be worth in 20 years. Told him I did. She turned to 1982. In the margin of a page dated May, Amory Broxton has stopped asking. He has started implying. Wynne is sick. He knows this. Called an attorney in Charlotte today. Meriwether Halstead. Set up a trust. Audley closed the ledger. She looked at Silas. Silas looked back. Marta had already reached for 1982. She was reading with the calm efficiency of a woman who had been asked to read many things in her life and had not enjoyed most of them. "There is a trust document," Marta said. "Not a copy, the original." She lifted the 1982 ledger and slid a folded packet from behind the inside back cover. The paper was old but not brittle. It had been kept dry. It had been kept flat. The letterhead read, "Halstead and Associates Attorneys at Law, Charlotte, North Carolina." The signature at the bottom was Odom's. The trust was 6 pages long. Audley read it slowly. Marta read it after her. Silas read it last. Verley did not read it. She stood at the door with her arms folded, watching the parking lot for cars that were not coming. The trust said this in plain language beneath the legal language: the property known as Larkspur Nursery, including the retail building, both greenhouses, the seasonal studio, the propagation shed, the wooden bridge, and the adjoining 12 acres of woodland, registered as parcel 7-1144B in Rowan County, was to pass on the death of Odom Rensmark to his daughter Audley Rensmark, unencumbered, unmortgaged, and unavailable for sale to any member of the Broxton family or any commercial or private entity in which any Broxton held or would hold an ownership interest, direct or indirect, at any time in the future. Should any such person or entity attempt to purchase, negotiate for, or claim interest in the property, including through any spouse, fiancé, business partner, or agent of a Broxton, the deed and all associated parcels would transfer automatically and irrevocably to the Piedmont Land Conservancy, a nonprofit organization registered in Charlotte in 1981, to be held in perpetuity as protected land in the name of Wynne Rensmark. The clause continued for 2 paragraphs. It named Amory Broxton by name. It named his brothers by name. It named his children not yet born by category. It cited the events of 1979 when Amory had attempted, with the assistance of an attorney later disbarred for unrelated reasons, to force a partition of the 12 acres. The clause did not name Whitfield. Whitfield had not been born yet. The clause named the children not yet born. Audley put the trust document down on the desk. Damn, the man had been dead 7 years and he was still winning. She did not say it aloud. Silas did. He said it quietly, standing beside her chair with his hand resting on the top of the stack of ledgers, and the word was not an oath. It was recognition. It was the sound a man makes when he sees a thing that has been in the room the whole time and only now becomes visible in the light. He knew. He knew in 1982. He knew Wynne was sick. He knew Amory would come again. He didn't know about Whitfield. He knew about the type. Audley looked at the trust. She looked at the stack of ledgers. 45 of them, indexed by year, wrapped in oilcloth in a stone vault behind a walnut panel her father had built when she was 25 years old and pregnant, and living an hour away from the nursery she had not known she would inherit. She turned to Marta. The letter. Which letter? There was a letter in the tin, Aunt Idela's, sealed. I never opened it. Marta's face changed. Where is the tin, the studio? Silas went. He was back in 90 seconds with the green tin under one arm. Ottilie opened it. Marriage certificate, discharge papers, twine-tied letters from Thorne, 2 pieces of jewelry, the receipt for the ceramic dog. And at the bottom beneath everything else, an envelope she had not opened in 28 years, because the seal had said in Idela's own angular hand, for Ottilie, not until you need it. Ottilie had not known when needing it would arrive. Now she did. She broke the seal. Idela's letter was 2 pages written in the same angular leftward-leaning hand as the single line in the 1998 ledger. It was dated August 1997, 6 months before Idela had died. It was written on the back of a receipt for groceries from a store that had closed in 2003, because Idela had never once in her life used a piece of paper before extracting its full value. Ottilie, your father asked me to write this because his hands were bad that year, and getting worse, and he did not trust his own handwriting to be legible in whatever hour you finally open this. I told him he was being dramatic. He told me I would be dead soon and would not have the opportunity to be right about anything else, so I might as well be right about this. He was correct. I died 2 months after signing. Cancer, nothing dramatic. He wanted me to tell you 3 things. The first is that Amory Broxton came to me in the boarding house in the spring of 1996 with a copy of your mother's death certificate and a set of questions about your father's competency. He wanted to know whether your father had been of sound mind when he set up the 1982 trust. He wanted to know whether Wynn's illness had affected your father's decisions. He wanted to know whether I would testify that Odom had been unstable during the summer she died. I told Amory Broxton that the last time a Broxton man had asked me for anything, I was 17 years old, and he was standing on my father's porch with a hat in his hand. I told him I had said no then, and I was saying no now. And if he came to my door again, I would use the shotgun my mother had used on a fox in 1938. He did not come again, but he did not stop. The second is that your father set up the 1982 trust after Wynn's diagnosis and not before. He did it because he was afraid. He said to me, and I am putting this down exactly as he said it, so you understand, he said, if I go before Ottilie has sense enough to see them coming, they will come through her children. They always come through the children. Amory would sell his own mother if his mother could sign her name. The third is this. Your father did not expect you to come home. He expected you to be evicted. He said the Broxton method would not be a lawsuit or a purchase. It would be a marriage. It would be a bright young man in a good coat sitting across from you at a Thanksgiving dinner, holding your daughter's hand under the table. He said Ottilie will not see him coming because she never saw Amory coming, because she was 17 and thought all men in good coats meant well. I was not blaming you. He was preparing you. He asked me to say one thing when you finally read this. He said if I said it, you would understand who had prepared what for you. Roots need air, so does everything else. He is coming for our girl through her daughter. Do not let sentiment cost you the ground your mother is buried in. I love you. Idela Rensmark, August 1997. Ottilie set the letter down. The office was very quiet. Verlie had turned her face away toward the window. Marta was looking at the trust document. Silas was looking at Ottilie. He knew. He knew. He knew before Corinne was born. He knew before you were pregnant with her. He watched me for 40 years and he never said. He said it every March and every October. Ottilie looked at him. Roots need air, Silas said. So does everything else. He said it to me the first time I met him. I thought it was gardening advice. It was. It was more than that. Yes. She stood up. Her legs did not shake. That surprised her. She had expected her legs to shake, and they did not. Marta, call Meriwether Halstead in Charlotte. Ask if she is still practicing. Marta was already reaching for her phone. She is. Her son and daughter run the firm now. She is 72 and semi-retired but still sees clients on Wednesdays. How do you know? I called her office yesterday when Silas told me about the trust word in the operating agreement. Silas turned. You knew about the trust. I knew there was a trust. I did not know the language. You didn't tell me. I did not tell you because your face when you learn a thing is a public event. I wanted to be sure first. Silas absorbed this. He did not argue. Call her. If you're still with me, hold on. Because what she carried into that lawyer's office the following Wednesday was not paperwork. It was 45 years of a father who had known before she was born that the money crowd would come. It was one aunt's warning mailed forward through 28 years of an unopened seal. It was a trust document written in a Charlotte law office in 1982 on the day a man decided that his daughter would not be evicted from the ground her mother was buried in. And it was a ceramic dog with crooked eyes. Ottilie carried the ceramic dog too. Meriwether Halstead was 72 thin and sat behind a desk in Charlotte that had held her father's law practice before hers. She wore a navy suit. Her hair was cropped short and silver. She had known Odom for 43 years, had drafted the 1982 trust in one sitting on a June afternoon, and had wondered every year for the past 7 whether Ottilie would come. He said you would come when the coat arrived. The coat? He said, Meriwether, she will come the day a man in a good coat sits at her table, and my granddaughter reaches for his hand. Ottilie set the trust document on Meriwether's desk. She set the 45 ledgers stacked in 3 canvas totes on the floor beside the desk. She set the receipt for the ceramic dog on top of the trust. She set Aunt Idella's letter on top of the receipt. Whitfield Broxton offered $85,000 for the property last Saturday. His uncle Callum Broxton is preparing a second offer. Callum is a member of the North Carolina Bar. He is licensed to practice in Rowan County. He is aware or should be aware of the 1982 trust because it is on record with the county clerk's office. He has proceeded with the offer regardless. Meriwether looked at the trust, then at the letter, then at Ottilie. You would like me to write a letter. I would like you to write too, to Callum and to the bar. Yes. Meriwether smiled for the first time. Your father said you would say that. My father said a great deal, apparently. He said one thing more than the others. I have heard it. Roots need air. Yes. Meriwether wrote the letters that afternoon. Ottilie signed. Ottilie's copy of the trust was placed in a fireproof envelope. The original stayed with Meriwether. The 45 ledgers stayed in Meriwether's custody until the following Monday when they were photographed page by page and returned to the vault behind the propagation bench. The letters went out Thursday morning by certified mail. By Friday afternoon, Callum Broxton had called the office 3 times. Ottilie let Verley answer twice. Verley told him the first time that Miss Rensmark was with a customer. She told him the second time that Miss Rensmark was in the greenhouse. She told him the third time after Ottilie nodded at her across the office that Miss Rensmark had no further business with the Broxton family and that any further communication should be directed to Halstead and Associates in Charlotte. Verley hung up the phone. She adjusted the sleeve of her red blazer. He did not enjoy that. I did. Corinne came on Saturday morning. She came alone. She parked at the far end of the lot and walked across the gravel in shoes that were not appropriate to gravel and had not been appropriate the last 3 times either. Ottilie watched her from the office window. Wickham the cat with his notched left ear and gray muzzle and single white forepaw and clouded right eye and black-tipped orange tail watched from the window ledge. Corinne came into the office. She did not sit down. Ottilie did not stand either. What she did was reach across the desk without hurrying and lay 3 things down on the wood between them in order. The first thing she laid down was a paper. She placed it flat letterhead facing Corinne. Halstead and Associates. A copy of the 1982 trust document. Clipped to the top corner was the Piedmont Land Conservancy's 1981 registration paper, in case Corinne wondered where the land would go if the Broxton name ever came near it again. The second thing she laid down was heavier. She reached to the floor beside her chair, lifted a canvas tote onto the desk, and pulled from it 3 ledgers, then 5, then 8. She set them in a stack, then a second stack beside the first, then a third. 45 green ledgers indexed by year spines facing Corinne so that Corinne could read the sequence. 1980, 1981, 1982. On top of the top ledger, she laid a single sheet of paper. Marta had prepared a photograph of a margin note dated 1979 in Odom's hand. Amory Broxton came out today. Wants to buy the 12 acres. Offered 9,000. Told him no. The third thing she laid down was smaller than the others. It fit in her palm. It was the receipt for the ceramic dog folded once. She unfolded it. She turned it over. On the back, in Odom's crooked handwriting in ink that had faded slightly but had not surrendered. Take care of my daughter when the money crowd comes. Odom, 1982. Beside the receipt, she placed the second envelope. Aunt Idella's letter, the seal already broken, the pages already read. Then Ottilie folded her hands on the desk and did not say a word. Corinne looked at the papers. Her eyes went to the trust first because she was her father's daughter, and legal papers still spoke to her first. Then to the ledgers because there were so many of them, and each spine held a year she had been alive for. Then to the receipt and to the handwriting on the back of the receipt and to the sealed envelope with her great-aunt's name at the bottom of the second page. She read for a long time. Ottilie did not rush her. Outside, the failing heater in Alpha, caught with a hollow bang, ran 7 minutes and stopped. Rain began again lightly. Wickham the cat rearranged his tail across his single white forepaw and did not open his one good eye. Corinne read the trust twice. She read the margin note. She turned the receipt over once and set it back down, and her hand when she released it was not steady. She did not touch the letter. She recognized the handwriting from the ledger line. She did not need to read the letter to know what it said. She sat down in the chair opposite Ottilie without being asked. She looked at the desk, then out the window, then back at the desk. Whitfield's uncle is losing his license. He has not lost it yet. He will. Yes, probably. Whitfield says the trust is unenforceable. Whitfield is not an attorney. He works with attorneys. He works with an attorney who is losing his license. Corinne's jaw tightened. Mom, this is destroying us. Whitfield's family destroyed the possibility of us the day your grandfather set up the trust. You did not know about the trust 3 weeks ago. I know now. You are using it as a weapon. I am using it as a fence. Corinne stared at her. There was something in her face Ottilie had not seen in years. Not anger, not fear. Something older than either. Something that had been in Corinne's face at 9, when she had learned that when her grandmother had died before Corinne was old enough to remember her. Whitfield and I are moving to Charlotte. Yes. You knew. I guessed. He has a job offer there. His firm is opening a branch. It was decided last night. When did you know it was being decided? Corinne did not answer. When Corinne, 3 weeks ago. Before you packed my bags. Yes. Ottilie did not say anything. She did not need to. Corinne looked at the papers on the desk again. At the trust. At the ledgers. At the receipt. At the ceramic dog on the shelf above the desk, which was watching her with one crooked eye. I am not going to apologize. I did not ask you to. I did what I thought was right. You did what was convenient. That is not fair. No, it is accurate. It is not fair to be accurate to your daughter. I know. I have chosen to be accurate anyway. This is the first accurate conversation we have had in 18 months, Corinne. I do not want to waste it on being fair. Corinne's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. I will send the rest of your mail for the next 60 days until we close on the Charlotte house. Thank you. That is not a peace offering. I did not receive it as one. Corinne stood. At the door, she stopped one hand on the frame and looked back once. The dog. The dog stays here. I did not ask for it. I know. She left. Corinne and Whitfield drove back to Charlotte the following Tuesday and did not come back. Ottilie did not hear from them again. Not that year, not the next. Callum Broxton surrendered his bar license in February to avoid a formal hearing. His firm dissolved by summer. Whitfield transferred to a marketing role that did not require an attorney's supervision, and Corinne took a claims position at a Charlotte insurance office that paid slightly more than her old one and slightly less than the mortgage on the house Ottilie had left behind. Ottilie learned these things secondhand from Emmett, who called on Sundays and did not press. She did not go to their wedding. There was no wedding. That was one of the things Emmett did not press about. The Monday after Corinne drove back to Charlotte, 3 cars turned into the Larkspur parking lot within an hour of each other. The first was Bexley Threlkeld's beige sedan. She got out with a thermos of tea and a paper bag of shortbread and a scowl. "I have brought tea," she announced to Verley at the door, "and an apology." "For what?" "For a thing I said about Silas Wenmore in 2019 that I now regret." Verley looked at Silas, who was carrying a bag of soil past the office window and had heard nothing. "He does not know you said it." "That is not the point. The point is that I said it. Now I have apologized. Where is the office?" Verley showed her in. Bexley set the thermos on the desk and glared at Ottilie until Ottilie poured herself a cup. "Your winter berries," Ottilie began. "My winter berries can wait. I came about something else." "What?" "I heard you refused $85,000. "Yes. For that piece of ground your father would not sell to Amory Broxton for $9,000 in 1980. "Yes." Bexley nodded once sharply. "Good." And she left. She did not stay for the shortbread. The shortbread was for Silas. The second car was Portia Sedgwick's rental. She came into the office in the same heels, unsuited to gravel, carrying a manila folder. "I have a contract, 3 properties, spring landscaping, Wexford House, and 2 additional hotels in the group. The design director signed yesterday. We would like Larkspur to be the exclusive supplier." She placed the folder on the desk. Marta was there in 20 seconds. The contract was $8,400 with a deposit of $2,000 in installments tied to milestones. Portia had negotiated for a discount. Marta had apparently by mail negotiated it back. The final price was fair. Portia handed over the deposit check as though she had been waiting to be rid of it. "You may not remember, but when you told me about the azaleas, you said the sprinkler would turn them into a funeral." "I remember. I checked the sprinkler that afternoon. It had been running twice a day for 2 years. Nobody had told me." Nobody wanted to tell the new manager she had inherited a problem. "I am not the new manager anymore. I am the director of grounds for 3 properties. Congratulations. I would not have that job if you had sold me 24 azaleas." Portia left. The check went into the account. The account did not empty. That was becoming a habit. The third car pulled in slowly as though its driver did not entirely trust the gravel or the driveway or the year. It was a green truck older than the retail building, with the passenger side dented in a shape Ottilie recognized before she saw the driver. Halloran Kettering was 78. He had farmed the 600 acres east of Sable Ridge Road for 60 years and had let his son take over the operation in 2018. He was thin in the way farmers are thin and slow in the way careful men are slow. And he did not speak until he was inside the office and standing in front of Ottilie's desk with his hat in his hand. He set an object on the desk. It was a ceramic dog. It had crooked eyes. Its left ear was chipped. Its painted mouth curved in an expression of foolish optimism. It was the twin of the one on Ottilie's shelf. Ottilie did not stand. She did not sit further back either. She looked at the dog, then at Halloran Kettering. "Your father made 2 of these." "He didn't make them. Thorne bought ours in Waynesville." "Thorne bought yours because your father asked him to buy it." She looked at him. "Your father commissioned 2 of them at a workshop up in Waynesville in 1975. Man named Fisk. Odom bought them both. He gave one to my mother in 1975, after he saved her rose garden from a nematode blight. She loved that dog. She thought it looked like a dog with opinions about the neighbors." Ottilie's throat closed for a moment. She died in 2003. The dog came to me. I have kept it on my mantle. It sits there still. Then why? Because your father told my mother and my mother told me that if either of us ever heard Adelie Rensmark had come back to the nursery, we were to bring the dog to her. Not to keep, to show. To show what? That there had been two. Why? Halloran turned his hat once in his hand. He was not a man who explained things. He appeared to be forcing himself to explain this one. Your father said to my mother in her kitchen in 1975 that he had made two dogs so that when the day came that his daughter needed proof, he had been thinking about her before she was born, there would be a second one somewhere in the county for her to see. He said one dog can be a coincidence, two is a plan. Adelie looked at the ceramic dog on Halloran's side of the desk. She looked at hers on the shelf. She looked at Halloran. He was 30 years too early. I was 30 years right on time. He just did not know when the time would come. Halloran picked up his ceramic dog. He put it under his arm carefully. I am not leaving it. It is my mother's, but you have seen it. That was the errand. It has been in my truck for 6 years. I did not know what to do with the errand until I heard from Bexley Threlkeld that you were back. He put his hat back on. He walked to the door. At the door he stopped. Roots need air, so does everything else. Your father said that to my mother the day he planted her new roses. She said it to me for the rest of her life. I have said it in my head every March for 22 years. He left. Verlai in the doorway wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Well, damn. Ottilie sat for a long time. Then she stood up. She walked to the shelf. She picked up her ceramic dog. She held it in both hands. Its crooked eyes looked at her. Its chipped ear caught the light. She put it back on the shelf facing the door so that it would see the next person who came in. The papers were signed at Marta's kitchen table the following Saturday. Meriwether Halstead drove up from Charlotte and sat at one end. Marta sat at the other. Silas sat across from Ottilie. Emmett was there on a video call from Denver. Verley was there in person because she had informed everyone that she considered herself family for the purposes of witnessing. The land stayed with Ottilie. The 12 acres of woodland stayed with Ottilie in the same trust her father had drafted in 1982, updated only in the section that named beneficiaries after her. The business, the retail operation, the greenhouses, the wholesale accounts, the inventory, the goodwill, the customer list was divided into 3 equal shares. Silas bought a third. His installment schedule was tied to actual revenue, not a fixed monthly amount. In months when the business made money, he paid more. In months when it did not, he paid less. His $7,003 came back to him in 3 installments over 18 months. He signed the papers with a pen he had borrowed from Marta, and he did not look up until he had finished signing. Marta bought a third. Her installment schedule matched her brother's. She had been the bookkeeper for the nursery unpaid since 2019. Every hour she had ever recorded on a legal pad was credited against her purchase price. When Meriwether Halstead read the final figure, Marta did not say a word. She simply drew a small box around the figure in her own copy of the agreement. Ottilie kept a third, and the land, and the studio. That was the shape of it. Silas set down his pen. Marta set down hers. Emmett on the video call said, "Congratulations, Mom," in a voice that surprised him. Ottilie opened the new ledger. It was cloth-bound the same style as the 45 in the vault. Marta had ordered it from a bindery in Winston-Salem. Its spine read 2025 in Marta's handwriting. Ottilie took a fountain pen from the desk. She turned to the inside front cover. She wrote in her own hand the sentence her father had said every March and every October of his working life. The sentence Aunt Idella had transcribed in 1998 when his hands had failed him. The sentence Halloran Kettering had said in his head for 22 years. The sentence Silas had said out loud in a rain-wet flower bed the day they went to visit Bexley Threlkeld. Roots need air. So does everything else. She capped the pen. She closed the ledger. She placed it on the desk beside her father's 46 now. Winter came. The failing heater in Alpha finally quit for good in early December. They did not replace it. They closed alpha for the season. They moved the plants worth keeping into beta. They wrapped the outdoor stock. They lost fewer plants than Silas had feared and more than he had hoped. The gardenias by the west wall did not survive. The lavender lost roughly half its number. The inkberries came through fine. Emmett flew home for Christmas. He stayed 4 days. He fixed the studio flashing, replaced 2 roof shingles, and did not mention Larkspur Hollow once. On the day he flew back to Denver, he shook Silas's hand and said, "Thank you for staying." Silas shook his hand back and said nothing. Both men considered the exchange complete. Verli stopped filling in at the Piedmont Grand Hotel. She said her ankles had made the decision for her. She replaced her red hotel blazer with a green apron embroidered with her name, and the green apron began to appear in customer photographs on the nursery's phone messages. Larkspur, she informed Ottilie, was becoming a destination. Ottilie asked her to please not put that on a sign. Verli put it on a sign anyway. It was a small sign above the office door and read, "Welcome back." Nobody complained. Marta took over the bookkeeping formally. She raised prices 6% in January and lost one wholesale account that had been unprofitable for 2 years. Silas complained for an entire afternoon and then used the space in beta to spread out the inkberries. He hired one part-time helper for weekends. The helper was a young woman named Rowan Marbury, 22 years old, quiet, tall, careful with her hands, and rented a room from a widow on Larkin Avenue. She had grown up in the county foster system and had aged out at 18 with 2 suitcases and a folder of documents. She kept the folder in the glove compartment of a truck she was buying from Silas on the same kind of revenue-tied installment plan he was buying his share of the business. Ottilie noticed on Roan's second Saturday that Roan touched the eastern doorframe of Beta with her right hand every time she passed through it. She did it without appearing to think about it. On the third Saturday, Ottilie realized Roan had learned it from Silas, who had done it every day of the 22 years he had worked for Odom, who had done it for the 39 years before that. Odom had learned it from his own father, who had built the door frame slightly out of plum and had touched it every morning for the rest of his life to remind himself to be humble about carpentry. Rowan touched it because Silas touched it. Silas touched it because Odom touched it. Odom touched it because his father built it crooked and never quite fixed it. Ottilie did not point this out to Roan. Some things pass forward better without being explained. The last conversation of the winter took place on the last Thursday in February. Ottilie had finished dialysis. Silas had picked her up in the nursery truck. It was raining lightly, and the road was gray, and the retail lot was empty because it was almost closing time, and the weather had kept the Browsers home. At the entrance to the parking lot near the leaning sign stood a woman. She was in her early 60s. She wore a brown coat, plain, functional, not new. At her feet was one brown suitcase. Rain had beaded on the coat's shoulders and along the top of the suitcase, and she was standing very still in the way women stand still when they are trying not to look like they have nowhere to go. Silas slowed the truck. He looked at Ottilie. "Do you want me to—" "No, keep going. Pull up by the office." "I did." Ottilie got out. She walked slowly across the gravel past the leaning sign toward the woman. Wickham, from the porch of the retail building, watched her go with his one good eye. The notched left ear was up. The gray muzzle was steady. The black tip of his orange tail lay across the single white forepaw exactly as it had lain across it on Ottilie's first night in the studio in November, when a cat had come down from the ceiling of a room she had not slept in for 40 years. Ottilie reached the woman. She stopped 6 feet away so as not to crowd her. "Are you looking for someone?" The woman did not answer for a moment. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. There was a difference. Ottilie recognized it. "No, I saw the sign from the road." "Which sign?" "The one that says, 'Welcome back.' I don't know why. I saw it." Ottilie nodded. "Do you have somewhere to be tonight?" "No." "Do you have somewhere to be tomorrow?" "No." "Can you tell me your name?" The woman said her name. It was Adeline. Ottilie did not ask her last name. She did not ask her age or where she had come from or what had happened to the woman in the brown coat that had put her at the edge of a parking lot in February with a single suitcase. Those things would come out or they would not. That was Adeline's business. Adelie reached into her pocket. She took out the key to the studio. She held it in her open palm. Then she reached into her other pocket. She took out a $5 bill, worn soft as cloth. 4 quarters. She counted them into her hand slowly so that Adeline could see the counting. Then she folded the bill around the quarters and placed the small folded shape on top of the key. There is a studio behind the small greenhouse. The shower takes 12 minutes to get warm. The roof leaks near the window if the rain blows east. There is a heater against the north wall that you have to hit once to convince. The refrigerator says push hard because it means it. There is a cat named Wickham who has one good eye. He does not need to be fed, but he will accept food if offered. Adeline looked at the key and the money in Adelie's palm. I can't. You can. This is $6. It is what my husband paid for a ceramic dog in 1982. It is what a stranger left in this office for me, in a way 43 years ago, though I did not know it until 3 months ago. It is the price of a night. You can stay tonight. Tomorrow you can decide whether you want to work here for wages, in which case you will return the $6 from your first paycheck. Or you can decide you want to leave, in which case you will keep the $6 and the key stays on the nail beside the office door. Adeline took the key. She took the folded bill and the quarters. Her hand shook once. She steadied it. Roots need air. So does everything else. That is what a man told me every March and every October of the years I was too far away to listen. He was my father. He is gone now, but he arranged this parking lot for me, and I am doing the same for you, and if you stay long enough, you will do the same for someone else. Behind them, Roan Marbury came out of Beta. She was carrying an empty flat. She passed through the eastern door frame and touched it with her right hand without looking. She did not stop when she saw Adelie and Adeline at the sign. She only nodded once and continued toward the retail building. Adeline watched her go. Who was that? That is Roan. She started here in November. She rents from a widow on Larkin Avenue. She touches that door frame the way Silas does, and the way my father did, and the way my grandfather did. Because a door frame in this county is a place you say hello to every time you pass through it. She looks like she belongs here. She does. So will you if you decide to stay. Adeline nodded once. She picked up her suitcase. Adelie turned. She began walking back toward the office. Adeline followed one step behind and then, without either of them thinking about it, alongside. Let that sit. She had been evicted at 68 in a treatment center by a photograph on a phone. Her daughter had used a vacation day. Her son-in-law-to-be had drafted the offer. Her son had booked a flight and toured the wrong room. And in 3 months, a woman of 68 had become the woman standing at the edge of a parking lot in February, in a faded blue cardigan and a brown coat, handing a key and $6 to whoever came next. That was not how the story was supposed to go. That was how the story went. On the porch of the retail building, Wickham the cat rose. He stretched. His notched left ear rotated once toward the two women coming up the gravel drive. His clouded right eye caught the last of the afternoon light. His single white forepaw stepped forward. His black-tipped orange tail lifted, curved, and settled. He walked to the door of the office. He waited. When Adelie opened the door, he went in first, because he always did. Adeline followed. Then Adelie. Silas held the door. Inside, on the shelf above the desk, the ceramic dog watched them come in with one crooked eye and then the other, and made no comment about either of them. The 46 ledger lay open on the desk. Adelie walked to it. She picked up the fountain pen. She wrote in the margin of the page for that day in her own hand. Adeline arrived. $6, one suitcase, studio. She capped the pen. She closed the ledger. She placed her hand flat on the cover for a moment. Then she turned to Adeline and to Silas and to Verley, who had come out from behind the counter, and to Marta, who had appeared in the doorway from the greenhouse, and to Roan, who had come in behind them with an empty flat under one arm and mud on her boots. Wickham had settled on the window ledge and closed his one good eye against the afternoon light. Roots need air. So does everything else. Silas at the door said it back to her in the same breath. Rowan, without looking up, said it once under her breath and did not know she had said it. Adeline, standing very still in the middle of the office with the key in one hand and $6 in the other, said nothing. Her lips moved. That was enough. Outside past the leaning sign that read Larkspur Nursery, in cream and faded green, the rain had begun to ease. The road was gray. The greenhouses were dark against the granite shoulder. The wooden bridge over the dry bed of Piney Fork Creek stood tilted 3 degrees from decades of settling and would stand there tomorrow and the day after, and would stand there as long as anyone remembered to walk across it in the morning and touch the eastern rail on the way past. Somebody would remember.